Greetings, friends, fellow patriots, fellow citizens, and even non-citizens, and welcome to this edition of the We the People Convention weekly news and opinion podcast on a beautiful fall day in October in Northeast Ohio. I hope that you are well. I thank you for joining us for today's podcast to catch up on the news. For those of you who are new, welcome to you. Thanks to everyone who watches this podcast for sharing it so that others can be informed and also can have an action plan for doing what? For protecting and defending our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. That's what this podcast is about. This podcast, our website, our text messages, our emails, our social media, our donations to other conservative groups are all paid for by the generous donations to our donors to the We the People Convention organization. And so if you can help with that, please go to wethepeopleconvention.org and make a donation. I think I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Tom Zawistowski. I'm the host of this podcast, and I'm also the president of the We the People Convention organization. And, you know, we are so thankful that you decided to join us on this beautiful week, fall week here in Northeast Ohio. I hope the weather is good where you are. There's lots to cover this week, good, bad, and ugly. I know that many of you are concerned. I'm recording this on Saturday, October 18th, and the No Kings protests are taking place today. And we are praying that there's no violence. We are praying that that it just is like the previous No Kings protest was just a non-event. We'll see what happens, and we're going to cover that in more detail as we get into the first half of the podcast. Let's start with this, though, because you and I witnessed and lived history this week, and it is such an insane world that we live in, where something as important as the Middle East peace deal is now because it's 5 days old, we're on to other things. You can't. You got to stop and celebrate. Trump celebrates peace in the Middle East in historic speech to the Knesset after hostages released. That video is on our podcast, on our website at wethepeopleconvention.org in our video section. And I'm imploring you to take the time to go watch it because it was truly historic. And the whole day, I mean, many people were crying because this was impossible. And Donald Trump did it. It was impossible. And Donald Trump did the impossible. And the world rejoiced, if just for that day. Okay. And you needed to be part of that because it just shows that you can persist in peace. And if you do so, you can get peace. Now, I get it. There's a long way to go, and we're going to cover that next. But watch that speech. It's historic. And then that ended up leading to him leaving, Israel. And again, remember, this is a guy that the left in the United States, the people doing the No Kings, protest today, call Hitler. And at the same time, you're watching TV and thousands, tens of thousands of Jews are chanting, "We love Trump." How do you square that, right? How would Jews say we love Trump when you call him Hitler? The hypocrisy was on display. And all the pro-Hamas people were shut up because now, they wanted to stop the genocide. Well, yeah, maybe we are. But then when he goes to Egypt and has this meeting, you can see on the screen for those of you who are listening, there's the Peace 2025, and there's Donald Trump with, 20-some world leaders who all signed on an agreement to fund the rebuilding of Gaza as a real country without Hamas terrorists running it. That's the plan. They all understand in the Middle East that It's stupid to keep spending money and destroying any ability for the Middle East to move forward, for their people to prosper like we do in the United States, when all you're about is destroying Israel. And so they're committing to rebuild it. And that's the way to peace. That's Trump is brilliant. He's brilliant. And for those of you who don't follow how these things all fit together, part of it is that China was in bed with Iran. China was starting to do deals in the Middle East. Russia and Turkey were together. And this was a threat to the United States. This was a threat to world peace. And so what does Trump do? He brings them all together. They all want to be with us. That's amazing. It's brilliant. And it will be in history books forever, for as long as our country exists. And we're not sure how long that'll be, but that's the fact. Now, again, I said, we're not stupid. We're not just naive. We understand there's a long way to go. And Hamas is supposed to disarm because why? Qatar and their other funders said, we're done. Turkey said, we're not giving you any more money. We're not going to let you use our countries to stage and have your leadership have safe haven. And so, basically, they don't have much choice. Yeah, but they're terrorists and they don't care. So Hamas terror reigns after Trump is there. And the next day, Hamas publicly executes Gazans after Israel troop pullback. So Israel follows the peace deal, and which required Israel's troops pulled back to a certain line in Gaza so that the Gazans could come back. And then Hamas is supposed to turn over the hostages, and they did turn over the 20 live hostages while Trump was there. And that was what was so joyous. They were supposed to turn over the remains of the dead hostages, and they did some, and then they didn't do some, and blah, blah, blah. And then they start executing people, okay? And Trump, let me just tell you, let me just read this for you, okay? Hamas publicly executed at least 7 men on Monday as the terror group moves to reassert control over the Gaza Strip after the ceasefire agreement with Israel. The men, whom Hamas accused of working with Israeli forces, were bound, dragged in front of a crowd of people, and forced to their knees, according to a video that was verified by Reuters and the BBC. Hamas fighters then shot each man in the back of the head. The terror group said that the men were criminals and collaborated with Israel. Okay? So that's who these people are. So here's what Donald Trump had to say. Donald Trump said, if Hamas continues to kill people in Gaza, which was not the deal, we will have no choice but to go in and kill them. Said it right out. Now, then he clarified that the United States, is not going to send troops in to Gaza to kill them. What he means is the IDF, the Israeli military, will be set loose and they'll just go wipe them out. Okay? So that's what you have to do. You can't negotiate with terrorists. And people are saying, well, we negotiate with terrorists. No, they're in a trap. They're done. Hamas is done. It's just a matter of time. And then there is real chance of peace in the Middle East. And everyone in the world should be excited about that. Everyone in the world, particularly Christians and Jews, right? Okay. So then, the next important story had to do with China. And China they just don't know what to do with Trump. Because the reality is that with you and I going and doing everything that had to be done to elect Donald Trump, the Chinese Communist entire plan to take over, to destroy the United States and then take over the world is falling apart. And they don't know what to do. So there's this push-pull because the reality is Trump knows we have to change our balance of trade with China. We have to bring jobs back to the United States. All those jobs that the Bushes and all the Republicans helped ship over to China that gutted Ohio and Pennsylvania and Indiana and Michigan and the Midwest, all those jobs have to come back. We've got to start to make things here again for two reasons. One, for national defense. Two, to rebuild our middle class, to rebuild the middle class life. And Trump's doing that, and I'll have more evidence of that in the second half of the podcast. So China put out this letter that Trump went ballistic on. And in their letter, they basically were saying that no one can get rare earth minerals, no country in the world, without China saying so. And Trump immediately put 100% tariff on China on any goods they ship to the United States, on top of like the 50% tariff they already had, to basically force them to drop this policy. So they act, Trump reacts, and the message was that they back down because Trump's supposed to meet with Xi in South Korea in a couple weeks. And so Trump said, that's off, we're not doing it. Well, then, they kind of backed down and said, well, we're going to reevaluate, whatever. It's all BS. And then President Trump said this. President Trump declares the United States in a trade war with China. The media, the press asked, are we in a trade war? And he says, we're in one now. We have 100% tariffs. If we didn't have tariffs, we would have no defense. They use tariffs on us, and we're going to use them against them. And so we're in a trade war. And no one knows. Trump later said that he doesn't know what the final agreement will be because, again, this is a delicate balance. There are hardcore people in China who want war. They want, and we've talked last week, for those of you who are new, go to wethepeopleconvention.org. You'll see a whole thing about China has set the stage they set the stage to invade the U.S. mainland. It's all there from these, the 30-some thousand military-aged Chinese that crossed the border during Biden's regime, to the 300,000 Chinese student spies, to the infiltration of our national security, buying farmland right next to military bases. I talked about that last week. Oh, and by the way, I saw a 60 Minutes clip this week of China has hacked into the water systems treatment plants at 200 cities in the United States. And 60 Minutes interviewed this guy from Massachusetts, little town. And the FBI came to him and said, they've hacked all your software. They could shut down your water like that. They could pollute your water like that. China is at war with us. Trump is finally acting like it, and he's fighting back. It's a trade war, but it's also a hot military war. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. Okay. So this is a breaking story, and it's important for you to understand because it's way beyond, the news they give you that's so stupid that, to try to distract you, right? Bread and circuses with in the Roman days. You got to stay on track with what's really going on that threatens your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. The number one threat to all of us is communist China. They want to rule the world. And that's just a fact. And this podcast reinforces that every step of the way. So I said we're in a hot war. Okay. Foreign espionage arrests up 50%, according to the FBI. We've gone after espionage activities against our main counterparts in China, Russia, and Iran, Director Kash Patel said this week. All right. In China alone, we've had over a 50% increase in espionage arrests alone and prosecutions. In Iran, we've had a 50% increase, again, in espionage cases. And in Russia, we have a 33% increase in espionage cases alone. And Patel has said that there have been 125 counterterrorism cases this year compared to 100 last year, and he cited increased disruptions on cybercrime enterprises. And so we talked last week about this SIM card farm that the Chinese have that could literally shut down our telecommunications in minutes. across the country. So why would you be doing this? If you were not at war with us, why would you be doing this? Now, I'm sure the U.S. spies on China and our allies and everyone else. We know that Israel spies on everyone. We got that. But this is way beyond that. This is, actually preparing for real war. That's what they're doing. And so the State Department, it gets worse. Deep state federal worker arrested for stealing classified documents, colluding with China. Ashley Tellis, a senior advisor to the State Department and contractor with the Office of Net Assessment and the Department of War, has been accused of unlawfully retaining classified documents and meeting with Chinese officials over the past several years. Court documents reveal that Tellis, who held top secret clearance, began working for the State Department in 2001 and is considered an expert on India and South Asian affairs. Federal prosecutors allege that Tellis had access to sensitive information and used his position to unlawfully obtain classified materials. During a search of his Vienna, Virginia home, authorities reportedly found over 1,000 pages of documents marked top secret and secret. On multiple occasions, Tellis allegedly met with Chinese officials, including a meeting in September of 2022 at a Virginia restaurant where he was observed holding a manila envelope. In April 2023, prosecutors claim Tellis discussed Iranian-Chinese relations and emerging technologies with Chinese officials during a dinner meeting. Okay? So they're spies. And Cash and the FBI are catching these guys, and thank God, because it's a real war. And then you get this, and this is the scary part. And I've told you guys, if you're new to this podcast, if you go to wethepeopleconvention.org, and right on the front page, it says the Dems are owned by the Chinese. And you click on that, and it will show you hundreds of links of politicians, including Republicans, Mitch McConnell and others, who take bribes from the Chinese to let them destroy our country. That's why we are at the risk we are in. And here's another example. Democrats under fire for accepting funds from CCP-linked businessman. New Jersey Democrat gubernatorial candidate. Now, this is a person running for governor of New Jersey right now, this November. Representative Mikey Sherrill and Virginia Democrat gubernatorial candidate Abigail Spanberger, running for governor of Virginia, are under scrutiny after receiving campaign donations from Pin Ni, a businessman with concerning ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Pin Ni, president of Waxing America Corporation, contributed $60,000 to One Giant Leap Super PAC supporting Cheryl's campaign and an additional $5,800 directly to her campaign this summer. Meanwhile, the CCP-linked businessman also contributed $50,000 to support Spanberger in Virginia. This is how they do it, folks. They buy them. Waxing America is a U.S. domestic subsidiary of the Chinese automotive conglomerate, whose late founder, Liu Guangji, was posthumously recognized as a National Outstanding Communist Party member. Okay? What the heck? The people that they want you to vote for them are taking money from communist China. Don't vote for them. We'll talk more about that and what's going on in those races as we go through the podcast here. Okay? So, again, the espionage with Russia and all that. So Trump goes from the Middle East, making headway in the Middle East with the peace talks, which everyone thought was impossible. And Trump even said that was harder than what Ukraine-Russia should be. And so now he's pushing. He's trying to get, the Ukraine-Russia war stopped. And he held a phone call. Trump holds productive call with Putin planned summit in Budapest. The call came a day before Ukrainian leaders Vladimir Zelensky scheduled White House visit on Friday as part of a renewed push to resolve the war in Eastern Europe. U.S. President Donald Trump said he spoke by phone with Russian President Vladimir Putin on October 16th and agreed to meet with him in Budapest, Hungary, with the aim of ending what he calls the inglorious war between Russia and Ukraine. Trump said on Truth Social post that he had concluded a very productive call with Putin. At the conclusion of the call, we agreed that there will be a meeting of our high-level advisors next week. Trump said, knowing that the initial meetings will be led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio and other officials to be named. And then President Putin and I will meet in an agreed-upon location, Budapest, Hungary, to see if we can bring this inglorious war between Russia and Ukraine to an end. Okay, the call lasted more than 2 hours and came a day before Zelensky, visited the White House. Zelensky came to the White House wanting Tomahawk missiles, U.S. Tomahawk, cruise missiles, which could really change the war. But it would also really escalate the war. And so Trump told Zelensky, told Putin, I'm thinking about giving him Tomahawks. And that's when Putin agreed to meet. Now, Zelensky was in a tough position because now he's in the White House in front of all the media, and he's asking for these Tomahawks, and Trump's like, well, we're going to talk about that, but I'd rather not give them. I'd rather just end the war. And so I don't think he's going to give them to them, but he's got to make that threat, and at some point he may have to make it real. In recent days, Russia has intensified missile and drone strikes on Ukraine, targeting mainly its civilian energy infrastructure. In the early hours of October 16th, Moscow launched more than 300 drones and fired 37 missiles at targets throughout Ukraine. Zelensky said. He noted that Russia is using double terror by continuing its strikes to target firefighters and energy workers who are trying to restore the damaged facilities. Trump earlier said he was considering sending Ukraine long-range Tomahawk missiles for use in its war. If this war doesn't get settled, I may send Tomahawks. So Trump is fully engaged. That's a big deal, and we're wishing for success. But, it's not easy. It's not easy because people want war. There's money in war. There's trillions of dollars being spent on weapons, and there's billionaires making that money. So, we'll see what happens, but at least Trump leveraged the Middle East piece to try to get the big enchilada to end the war with Russia and Ukraine, and that could really, really help the global economy and get our focus on productive things instead of destructive things. So, God bless President Trump. It's absolutely amazing what he has done already. He'll tell you a million times, I've already solved 8 wars, and he has. But, you can't let that you can't let that distract you from what he really is accomplishing, which is fantastic. Okay, so now we got to get on with the domestic issues, which, let's start with the shutdown. All right. And Speaker Johnson said we're barreling towards one of the longest shutdowns in American history. And I was kind of surprised by that. So, this article kind of spells out. Speaker Mike Johnson on Monday said the government shutdown is on its way to being one of the longest in history unless Democrats accept the House passed GOP crafted stopgap bill to reopen the government. Now, again, that's a terrible sentence because it is a stopgap, House passed bill. But it wasn't GOP crafted. It was the same bill that the Democrats had voted for 13 times before. There's nothing in this that should make them not vote for it except to try to stop Trump. He said, we're barreling towards one of the longest shutdowns in American history unless the Democrats drop their partisan demands and pass a clean, no strings attached budget to reopen the government and pay our federal workers. The longest government shutdown, which is also the last time a federal funding lapse occurred, was from 2018 to 2019, when guess who was president? Donald Trump. It lasted 35 days. I think we're in like day 18 or something now. The second longest shutdown under former President Clinton lasted 21 days, while funding lapses under former President Obama in 13 and former President Carter in 1978 lasted 17 days. So, okay, it's getting to be a big deal, all right? But then, Mike Johnson zeroed in. We talked about no kings. Mike Johnson says Dems won't end shutdown until after no kings protest. Internal documents show he may be right, all right? So let's take a listen to what Johnson had to say about the no kings thing.
I'll turn it back over to the leader. We take some questions, but we've heard, and many of you have reported already, this Hate America rally that they have coming up for October 18th, the Antifa crowd and the pro-Hamas crowd and the Marxists, they're all going to gather on the mall. We got some House Democrats selling T-shirts for this event. It is an outrageous gathering for outrageous purposes, but the Democrats in the Senate have shown that they're afraid of that crowd, that they don't want to bow, that they want to bow to them, bow the knee to them, and they don't want to take incoming from them. And so they're willing to hold the American people hostage so that they don't have to face an angry mob that's a big chunk of their base. Now, if that's a rumor, they need to come out and clarify that it's not, but that is what we are hearing is their actual motivation, and it is outrageous. All this has got to come to an end.
So they're basically, accusing Trump and the Republicans of shutting down the government when they're shutting down the government, and they're extending it when they say, you don't care about the people, the workers aren't getting paid, except they're the ones who don't care about the people who are getting paid. All right. And as Johnson said, this isn't about, no kings. There's nobody who thinks Donald Trump is a king. I think the name of this hurts them personally. I think the messaging is wrong because guess what? We agree in no kings either, right? We don't believe in kings, and Donald Trump isn't a king, or he wouldn't have to deal with all these courts trying to stop him from doing things. Kings don't have to worry about that. On Saturday, demonstrators across the country will gather in what organizers describe as a peaceful national day of action and mass mobilization in response to the increasing authoritarian excesses and corruption of the Trump administration. Okay? That's bull. And they're claiming, these are just regular citizens, don't you know? Except the No Kings document make clear there is no grassroots movement. It includes in the group's online asset packets are flyers, rally signs, printed materials to distribute, a comprehensive 10-page song and chant document, safety planning instructions, and various other event resources. Where does this come from? Oh, yeah, but Antifa is just an idea. There's no organized structure or money behind them, right? Oh, yeah? Right? Gaslighting much? The group has already held multiple trainings and is planning another session on Tuesday, October 14th, aimed at the messaging and how to talk about your local No Kings movement, both to reporters and your local media channels. Get the propaganda going, kids. Here's what you say, even though it's total lies. A mobilization call was held on September 18th, just weeks before the government shutdown. Get that? They planned it before the shutdown. The shutdown is part of the strategy. To do what? To stop Donald Trump from doing what the American people elected him to do. Understand? This is insurrection. They're the ones who say, he's destroying our democracy, except they don't want to acknowledge the vote. There's nothing Donald Trump is doing, from closing the border to ending the wars to cutting inflation to opening up energy to deporting the illegal army they imported that we didn't vote for. And he's doing it all under the law. But they don't want you to know that. So they're going to lie to you, and this is just part of that. Organizers said in a prep email that thousands of events were planned across the country. According to promotional materials, documents, and interactive maps published shows just how widespread the effort is. They're talking like 2,700 locations. A safety planning worksheet reveals signups for volunteers to assist with medical support, press support, and even jail support, right? What is jail support? In the event of arrest, track arrested individuals and coordinate legal assistance. Reach out to the local chapter of the National Lawyers Guild for support or the names of local lawyers willing to offer services pro bono, the document says. The group also posted a video on October 7th with tips for attendees, including instructions to use encrypted apps such as Signal. Okay? This is the organized anti-American protest that has, and I'm talking about both the shutdown and the No Kings, that has the goal of basically shutting down the government and stopping Donald Trump, denying what you and I voted for. They're anti-democratic. They're Marxist. They're just Marxist. Okay, and I'll have an example of that. I'll list the groups here in a minute. But I wanted to share this with you. This is a chart about funding. Okay, yeah, no money here, right? This is a protest that is against kings and billionaires. They actually say that on their sides, except it's all funded by billionaires. We traced $294 million to the official No Kings 2.0 partners and organizers, all funneled through the same Riot Inc. dark money networks. Arabella Network, 80 million. Soros Network, 72 million. Ford Network, 52 million. Tides Foundation, 45 million. Rockefeller Foundation, 29 million. Warren Buffett, 16 million. Okay? It's all paid for by billionaires, but they're the ones saying they're protesting the billionaires. Lies. It's all lies. Just flat out is lies. Okay? So we'll get more, to that, the No Kings thing in a minute, but let's just finish up, with the shutdown, okay? So Trump's shutdown layoffs target left-wing HUD office that tried to abolish the suburbs. What? Tried to abolish the suburbs. But see, this is what we wanted. This is what you and I voted for. We wanted Trump and his team to dismantle the federal government that doesn't work for us. They just steal our money to destroy our country and basically enrich themselves. And so this is a perfect example. So I want to use it because they've already laid off like 10,000. I mean, they've literally fired 10,000 workers. Way too few. Come on, Russ Vaught. Let's go, baby. We want way more than that. But there's an example of things that had to be done that were done. More than 400 employees at the Department of Housing and Urban Development were issued layoff notices on Friday, primarily targeting an office that pushed left-wing ideology. The HUD official said the largest office targeted by 442 layoffs was the agency's Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity Office, which officially said became the tip of the spear for left-wing initiatives under former President Joe Biden. The office is tasked by law with enforcing the Civil Rights Act and processing complaints from people who say they're discriminating against in housing due to disability, race, sex, national origin, etc. The office's budget was increased by 20% under Biden and employed nearly 600 people. Yet it was so focused on issues like transgenderism and dubious theories about systemic racism that it failed to process complaints about more straightforward discrimination. It was weaponized by Biden and the left, like so many other parts of our government, to do what? To push an agenda and to attack our rights. For example, Biden administration became obsessed with the theory that racist home appraisers might be estimating homes owned by blacks at lower values than those owned by whites. The dubious theory is undermined by the fact that appraisers often don't know the race of the homeowner, and the process is driven by formulas such as comparisons to similar homes in the area. Right? They were looking for the boogeyman in place that they didn't exist. In another case, FUD's Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity Office conducted an investigation. They claimed that the city of Chicago was racist against blacks and foreigners because it helped create a recycling center on the southeast side of Chicago. The suggestion was that it was environmental racism to put a polluting industry in a neighborhood that many black and brown people live in. Then Mayor Lori Lightfoot called it absurd and declared the federal government dared the federal government to enforce its rulings that city planning and zoning were discriminatory. Okay? So even the commie mayor of Chicago said, we need the recycling center and it can go in this neighborhood. And the federal government, the lefties were trying to fight them. But now let me get to the last piece, which is when they were trying to make suburbs illegal. This office was poised to use similar logic to drastically change the everyday lives of hundreds of millions of Americans through a rule that held that minimum lot size were also discriminatory planning and zoning. That is, the affirmative fair housing rule would effectively abolish the suburbs, which are characterized by single-family homes on lots of specific sizes without withholding huge sums of federal funding unless towns and counties allowed lots to be subdivided without restrictions and for dense housing to be built everywhere. This was their plan that said, we're going to go build Section 8 housing or government apartment buildings in your neighborhood, in your suburb, okay? The logic was that it is racist not to have apartments everywhere because blacks like to live in apartments, even though the majority of Americans of all races live in the suburbs and presumably choose to do so because they like the level of density and want to keep it that way. The rule was introduced at the end of Barack Obama's presidency, repealed by Trump, and then reintroduced by Biden. That woke joke agency of HUD It's gone. That's what we voted for. That's what you and I voted for, okay? It's now gone. Okay, and then this is, again, how things, this podcast is called News and Opinion because we give you the news like that, but then the opinion part is how does it all fit together? So Trump is saying that the tariffs are helping with the shutdown. Trump, we're ready for a long shutdown thanks to tariffs. Constitutionally suspect? Maybe. Strategically brilliant? Certainly. Democrats have put themselves in a historically bad spot by choosing to reject a clean continuing resolution offered by the Republicans. The track record of government shutdowns have been grimmer than a roulette wheel on a dodgy casino on a secondary highway. The House, or miraculously the White House, always wins. Presidents control the designation of essential services. They say, well, you're going to shut down all the non-essential services. Well, what are those? Well, Barack Obama was going to withhold your Social Security check to get Republicans to cave, right? Well, what's Donald Trump doing? He's shutting down all the lefty organizations, right? He's shutting down that HUD office, not essential, okay? So they get to decide the use of funds when Congress refuses the budget, which is why Democrats who know this better than the GOP usually have never opted for a shutdown as a bargaining tactic until now. Trump's foreign policy offers him fiscal strength that previous presidents had not had in shutdowns, at least not to the extent Trump will enjoy. The White House is girding for a long shutdown and has found several new funding streams for critical programs. The Office of Budget Management and Budget, Russ Vought's group, is working on ways to get paychecks to federal law enforcement, according to an administrative official. This is similar to what Trump ordered over the weekend to have 1.3 million active duty military members get paid. The Trump administration will ensure the special supplemental nutrition program for women, infants, and children, WIC, will continue to operate. And then, he's using tariff revenues to help fund this. And fortunately, they're historic. They're at a historic level. So who's getting hurt? Whose ox is getting gored? Well, it's mostly the left. An October 15 report from WalletHub indicates that some 900,000 federal employees have been furloughed, while another 700,000 continue to work without pay. Essential services such as air traffic control and military operations continue. The data shows that Washington, D.C. is experiencing the brunt of the stalemate, given that 25% of all jobs there are related to federal government. The district is also home to the highest number of federal contract dollars per capita. What a surprise, which translates to an impasse on many ongoing projects. In addition, the capital has the second highest number of residents enrolled in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Isn't that interesting? That Washington, D.C., which has all this government money, right? And all these people who live there and work there are, making big government checks, but they also have the poorest, the most SNAP people. Food stamps. Yeah. Democrat run city. Why is that? Isn't that racist HUD? Shouldn't you look into that? In addition, okay, let's see here. Hawaii is listed as the second most affected state because it's a large number of federal workers. About 5.6% of all jobs in Hawaii are federal positions. That's interesting. New Mexico, get this, is listed as the third state most affected by the government shutdown, as it receives more than $6,000 per capita in federal contracts, and a fifth of its population is enrolled in the SNAP program. These are welfare states. These are failed states. New Mexico is a failed state. According to the Congressional Budget Office, the shutdown is estimated to cost the U.S. economy close to $400 million per day. Other states hurt the most by the shutdown include Alaska, Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, Alabama, Oklahoma, and Arizona. Meanwhile, Minnesota, Iowa, Indiana, Nebraska, and New Hampshire represent the top 5 states that are least affected by the shutdown. Okay? So, who's doing this? It's not Trump. It's not the Republican House and Senate. It's the Democrats. Don't let anybody tell you any different. And guess what? After this No Kings thing happens, you watch. They're going to change. They're going to settle. Okay? They're going to settle. So let's talk about the No Kings rally. Abbott deploys National Guard ahead of No Kings anti-Trump protests in Austin. And I was glad to see this. I had actually talked to our Ohio Senator Bernie Moreno saying, I really thought that Trump should call the National Guard out in Washington because I'm concerned of this group, what they might do. Now, I kind of suspect that they're ready. I gotta be shocked if they're not. But I wanted to see something more visible, like put the fencing up around the Capitol, like they did after January 6th, as if we were going to assault the Capitol. Well, I thought it would be good messaging for us to put the fence up again and have a bunch of National Guard there to say, these people are dangerous, they're anti-American, and we have to defend against them. Senator Moreno thought they were just going to make idiots of themselves anyway, and it didn't matter. We'll see. We're praying, okay? But what Abbott did, Governor Greg Abbott is deploying the Texas Department of Public Safety and the Texas National Guard to Austin ahead of the nationwide No Kings protest planned for Saturday, October 18th, the day we're recording this. The event is linked to left-wing Antifa groups that have staged anti-Trump demonstrations across the country. The violence and destruction has never been tolerated in Texas, said Abbott. Today, I direct the Department of Public Safety and National Guard to deploy all necessary law enforcement officials and resources to ensure the safety of Austin residents. The No Kings movement describes itself as anti-authoritarian protest effort opposing what organizers call executive overreach under President Donald Trump. But similar demonstrations drew large crowds nationwide, including in major Texas cities, but they really were ignored. What's the point? Okay, you have a right. You have a right to do this, and we got it. All right. But here's a list of the sponsors in New York. And if you look at this list, and those of you listening, I'll just point some out. And the bottom part of this, you'll see CPE USA. That's the Communist Party USA is sponsoring the No Kings events. New York City Democrat Socialists of America, the SEIU. These are all commie groups who are what? Not just funding it, but supplying the people. All right, paid people to go to this. Yes, there'll be some 1960s hippies, 60 and 70-year-old pink-haired ladies out, okay, because they got Trump derangement syndrome. But Antifa and the rest of them are the paid militants. And this is where the threat is. So I want to just play this quick video of Scott Bessent on the Charlie Kirk radio and podcast this week, talking about the fact that Charlie Kirk's murder was a domestic 9/11, and he's acting accordingly. Watch this. This is really good.
Treasury has taken an active role in an aspect of this dismantling of the financial networks that are supporting some of these radical left violent groups. Share with what you can. I know it's an ongoing process.
So it's an ongoing process, and I will tell you that after 9/11, Treasury became the driving force behind tracking down the networks of terrorist organizations, how they were financed, how could this have happened on U.S. soil with these international terrorist organizations? Where did the money come from? Who were the ultimate funders? And that was on the international side. And Andrew, I will tell you that Charlie's death is like a domestic 9/11, that we are going to find. It has alerted us to what Charlie knew, that these organizations are working within our borders. And look, we believe people have a right to free speech. They have a right to organize. They have a right to protest, but they have to do it peacefully. They cannot embrace violence, and we have seen it. We've seen it since the terrible day 2 years ago, the anti-Semitism and the bias that came out after October 7th, 2023. And many of these organizations have been financed by nonprofits, and it's going to stop. And we are going to, as they always say, follow the money. When you see these groups where all the signs match, they have hundreds of the same umbrellas that they're using. After they cause the mayhem, they have the same lasers that they're using to blind our police force. How are they constructed? Because this takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of organization, and we are going to do that. We have started to compile lists, put together networks, and There's a long record here. And we don't know how much of the support's coming in from overseas. We don't know how much being supported by U.S. nonprofits, C3s that give money to C4s. But this is mission critical for us now, just as after 9/11 and Osama bin Laden, the ultimate culprit, was captured. We are operationalizing this here at Treasury, and we are going to track down who is responsible for this. So Charlie's death has set this off, and we're determined not only to honor him, but to keep our country safe and to ensure freedom of speech on both sides. That we can't, as conservatives, we can't be afraid to go out and speak. I know people are canceling speeches. They're having to bring down the size of the rallies. President Trump was millimeters away from death, and he was not deterred, and we're not going to be deterred.
So there you have it. I mean, I'm convinced that there's going to be real results, that these people who are funding terrorism, who are funding violence, are going to be charged, and their money's going to be taken, and this terrorist organization, just like the Black Panthers in the 60s, were destroyed, were taken apart and stopped. We're going to stop Antifa, and you can see it. The Bassett is on it, and he's not fooling around. He's serious as a heart attack. So an example of that is this story that came out. Trump administration directs banks to monitor Antifa and other left-wing domestic terror groups. This is important. The Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN, is a division of the U.S. Treasury Department, has begun encouraging U.S. financial institutions to report suspected terrorist activity with an emphasis on far-left groups like Antifa. In September, President Donald Trump designated Antifa a terrorist organization, opening the group to increase federal law enforcement scrutiny and potential financial sanctions. I think he's going to declare them an international terrorist group as well, which will bring in more help, because then the CIA and those guys can spy on the funders from overseas, like the Swiss billionaire who's put in money to this No Kings thing, right? So now, again, I know, the left subjected us to this stuff. They were using FinCEN to look at our bank accounts. They were calling us domestic terrorists. But we didn't commit any violence. Even January 6th, that whole story has fallen apart. What was the Tea Party known for? Many of you in this audience went to Tea Party rallies, went to Washington to protest Obamacare, went to your state house, your state capitol, and all that stuff. What were we known for? Leaving the park cleaner than it was when we got there, picking up all the trash. The police used to say, this is crazy. These people don't cause any trouble at all. But all of a sudden on January 6th, that all changed. Yeah. Not Antifa. The Tea Party never had the George Floyd riots of 2020, did we? We never had that. We never set cities on fire. They did. They murdered people. They beat people. They burned businesses. They've never been held accountable. Now's the time. Now's the time. Okay? So, part of the hook, right? The hook for this is, Trump is just going into cities and grabbing citizens off the street and stuff, okay? And it's not true. It's not true. But let me go back to one more story to show that they're actually acting. Antifa hardest hit as Kash Patel shares big news about suspects in Prairie Land Detention Center attack. This is the attack in Texas. On Thursday afternoon, FBI Director Kash Patel shared news related to the arrest that had previously made in connection to the July 4th, domestic terror attack at Prairie Land Detention Center in Alvarado, Texas, in which a police officer was shot in the neck. He said, for the first time ever, the FBI arrested Antifa-aligned anarchists who are violent extremists, and terrorism charges have been brought against them. So the Antifa people in this were finally charged with terrorism. Let's see here. Under President Trump's new authorities, we have made 20 plus arrests. No one gets to harm law enforcement. Not on my watch, says Kash Patel. The two men were indicted. Cameron Arnold and Zachary Evans were previously charged in connection with the alleged ambush of federal agents at the ICE facility and attempting to kill two correctional officers and an Alvarado police officer. But the grand jury indictment charged both with an additional count of providing material support to terrorists. This is the change. According to Patel, this was a planned and coordinated terrorist attack with armed extremists who tried to murder U.S. officers. Antifa expert Andy No said that one of them, Cameron Arnold, is a member of the violent Trans-Tifa, the Trans-Antifa group. The group was heavily armed with over 50 firearms that were purchased in Fort Worth and Grand Prairie, Dallas, and elsewhere in Texas, according to the indictment. The documents also noted that Arnold allegedly built numerous AR platform rifles, some of which he distributed to his co-defendants. Arnold and Evans and others also used an encryption messaging app to coordinate their moves, according to the DOJ. A total of 15 suspects have been arrested in the case. The mugshots of 10 of them were released shortly after they were taken into custody, and they're going to be charged. So this is the first time they're charging Antifa members with terrorism charges, okay? And that's what's got to happen. So the hook, as I was beginning to say, was that, Trump is just he's a king because he's ignoring the law, and he's just going into Chicago and LA and Memphis and all these other cities for a military takeover. If you go on X.com, which you'll see me, Tom Z, WTPC at X.com, you will see just story after story from Hakeem Jeffries, from the MSNBC, from Schumer, from Obama, from everybody saying, this is a military takeover. Gavin Newsom's bizarre comms team is always saying, Trump wants to take over the country militarily. There's no evidence of that. And there's no evidence that he's arresting American citizens. That's their claim. But these people are illegals. That's who they're arresting. And that's who they're protesting the arrest of. Why? Because the Marxists imported these illegals to help destroy our country. Economically, we'll talk about that, okay, how much money they were taking, and politically, by illegal voting. So what happens this week? Because the problem is it's working. It worked in D.C. It's working in Memphis. Go watch the testimonials about Memphis. It worked in Los Angeles. Okay, so what happens now? Slap in the face. Mark Benioff, a billionaire that supported the longtime Democrat ally, supports Trump and stuns San Francisco by saying he wants Trump to send troops to San Francisco. No holds barred, Dem mega donor Mark Benioff flips the script, backs Trump sending the National Guard to smash San Francisco crime wave, calls him doing a great job. This billionaire said Trump's doing a great job. Dems are reeling from the tech giant's betrayal after years of blue donations. Why? Because it works. Trump's not trying to take over San Francisco. Who would want to? He's trying to stop them from killing people and allowing that. And this is what's so disgusting about Pritzker and the mayor of Chicago. We're talking about thousands of deaths that they do nothing about. And when Trump tries to stop it by taking the murderers and the drug dealers and the rapists off the street, they protest. The nut jobs who are going to be out maybe in your community around the United States today saying, no kings, stop Trump's overreach, are protecting the criminals, not you. Not you. And so we've got a real problem in Chicago because this lefty judge has ordered ICE to take down the fencing. And now she's saying ICE is not allowed to use tear gas to break up the crowds. So there's ICE agents there. And the leftists under Soros, these guys, the Antifa Marxists, are literally trying to attack the police. This judge says you got to take the fencing down because you didn't have a permit to put it up. And number two, you can't use tear gas or anything anymore to disperse the crowd. And now she wants them to wear, every one of them have to wear a body cam. And now they're trying to get them to take off their masks. Trump has to say, F you. What are they doing? What is this judge doing? Are they upholding the law? The law is you can't attack police officers. She's saying, we're going to disarm you so they can. Why? What's the whole goal here? The goal is to destroy the United States of America, literally through violence if necessary. And this judge is helping them. That's why we're on the precipice. We got China, wanting to attack us externally, and we've got them funding this insurrection. There's no other word for it on our soil. That's what Trump's up against. Pray for him. Pray for his whole team. This is insane, but it's happening, and it's not going to get less. The more desperate they get, folks, the more they're going to do this. Okay? And so I'll wrap up the first half of the podcast with this piece because it says it all. Okay? It just says it all. Democrats are promising to weaponize the government against Trump and his allies as soon as they get power back. Now, again, they're the ones who are accusing Trump of doing exactly what Obama did to the Tea Party, right? And what Biden and his lefties did to us on January 6th. But now, if they get back power, they're guaranteeing. Democrats aren't even hiding anymore. They openly threaten to weaponize the government against Donald Trump and anyone who dares stand with him if they manage to claw their way back into power next year. Pritzker is actually saying that after Trump is gone, we're going to go after individual ICE agents and our National Guard members for breaking Illinois law. That's what they're saying. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries just laid it all out there on NBC News interview while reacting to the indictment of New York Attorney General Letitia James by a grand jury on mortgage fraud charges. He said there's two things to keep in mind here, Jeffrey said. First of all, there's accountability for the corruption and the chaos that Donald Trump has unleashed on the American people from the very beginning of his presidency on January 20th, when that should be tied directly to the Supreme Court and the 6 right-wing justices who basically gave Donald Trump, without justification, blanket immunity, and he's been out of control ever since. So he's literally threatening to go after Supreme Court justices, okay? Judges continue. Problem number 2, of course, is the fact that there are so many different corrupt sycophants within the Trump administration, including but limited to within the Department of Justice. These people don't have immunity either. And the reality is the statute of limitations is 5 years, and there will be accountability with the next administration, if not before, when Democrats take back control of the House of Representatives. Let that sink in for a minute. Jeffries is promising retribution, plain and simple. And this isn't just one rogue congressman shooting off his mouth. He's the House Minority Leader, but there's even more chilling that he's not alone. Representative Eric Swalwell, who slept with a Chinese woman spy and leaked secrets and is a traitor and should be prosecuted for that, was singing the same tune on CNN last month, admitting Democrats were planning to turn the government into a weapon against Trump and his allies if the second they get the gavel back. Accountability is coming. I hope that deters people, Swalwell declared. That's not an oversight. That's intimidation. That's a threat. Democrats spent years cheering when Joe Biden allegedly weaponized the DOJ. Not allegedly. Project Arctic Frost. The documents are there. They weaponized the DOJ against American citizens during Trump's presidency and afterwards, and now they're dropping the mask entirely to promise the same treatment for Trump allies. This is chilling stuff. What Walwell described wasn't about protecting national security or going after actual criminals. It's about using government resources to punish political enemies. They're accusing Trump of going after political enemies. But the fact of the matter is, James, she is guilty of mortgage fraud. They've got the documents. Same with Shifty Schiff. That James Comey leaked classified documents. Bolton, those 18 counts, they've got the goods. That's not true of any of the charges they did against Steve Bannon, Mike Flynn, Papadopoulos, Peter Navarro. They were the ones who weaponized the government. They're the ones who are terrorists in government. That's why we took the government back from them. That should motivate all of you listening to this podcast to work like hell to make sure we win in 2026, because they don't want to have government. They want to have tyrannical rule over all of us. That started with Obama, and it's not changed. This is a war to defeat the communist left and their attempts to overthrow the U.S. government. And that's going on today by defeating the No Kings rally and making sure that that violence doesn't spiral into something like 2020 without being crushed, using military force if necessary. Okay? All right. Going to take a break. Hope you enjoyed the first half of the podcast. You've been listening to the We the People Convention News and Opinion podcast, and my name is Tom Zawistowski. We'll be back after these short messages. The We the People Convention News and Opinion radio program is paid for by donors like you. You can donate to the We the People Convention and support our cause by going to wethepeopleconvention.org or by sending your check in any amount to We the People Convention, P.O. Box 6211, Akron, Ohio 44312. When you're playing a video, including our podcast, you'll see this little cloud button. And if you click it, it'll actually download the video to your hard disk. And this works on our podcast page as well. If you're playing our podcast, and it's going to be loud, so I won't play it for much, but there's our podcast playing, and you can see this little, download button. Okay. The other thing you got to notice on our podcast page is that there's a link here where you can send me a message about this podcast. Hey, it was great. Hey, I didn't like it. Something was wrong, or here's a correction, that kind of thing. You can use that link. And then these are the stories that I covered in this particular podcast. And you'll see there's links that go to the stories, to the articles that I used in reporting on that. So you can click on that. You'll also see that you can sign up for our emails and text messages, but you can also watch our podcast on Roku TV and on Amazon Fire TV. And these are the instructions for doing that. So this is all on our podcast page, right on the front page where the yellow button was. So if you click there, this is our podcast page. These are the instructions for watching on Roku TV or Amazon Fire. And I watch our podcast on TV. It just feels more comfortable. So you can do that. We're also on Rumble. If you go to Rumble, you should join Rumble. And it's Tom Z at WTPC. You'll see our podcast there. So you can get us a lot of different ways, including on Apple iTunes. And then this is an audio version of our podcast. If you click here, it'll just play the audio of the podcast. It will not, show you the video. So people can, listen to that while they're jogging or, working out, working in the yard, or just relaxing and just want to listen to the audio and not watch the video. And again, this is available on phone, on your iPad, on your laptop, on your computer, any way you want. And you can share this whatever you see. If you're on a page that you really like, and you see an article that you think, geez, I've got to share this article, with someone in my family. You can send them an email by clicking on the little envelope. You can post it on Parler or MeWe. If you click on this, you get all kinds of options, where you can put it on Twitter or Facebook, whatever, which we don't support, but you can do whatever you want. So we ask that you share what you see on our We the People Convention site, and that you get more people to look at it, because that's the whole idea here, to help educate people, inform them. And then, as I said before, Link, we're not just about talk, we're about action. And in my podcast every week, which is published every Saturday, so if the new podcast usually comes out every Saturday, and in that podcast, I will ask you to do certain things that will help protect and defend your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. So that's the We the People Convention website. Come back often, use it to be informed, and share it with others. Thanks a lot. All right. Thank you for sticking with us for the second half of the podcast. We appreciate that. In that video, we say we're not on Facebook. We are on Facebook. We are on Twitter. We are on Getter. We are on Gab. We are on MeWe. We are on we're on Roku. We're on Rumble. We're on YouTube. We are not on TikTok. We've been thrown off again. Okay. I don't know what it is. Nobody else having a problem with the stuff that I put on there, but TikTok has banned us again. So I guess we're not going to be on TikTok until the U.S. government takes it over, or Larry Ellison, I guess, takes it over. Whoever's going to take it over. But anyway, we're not on TikTok, but we're on everything else. Tom Z, WTPC, or We the People Convention. You can find that. Please follow us. Please share our stories. And we have this thing on our website called the Chapters Player. And basically, this podcast, we submit it to an AI on Saturdays after we're done, and it gets processed. It usually takes till Sunday morning, but sometimes on Saturday we can get it up. And it takes the podcast and takes every story and creates a separate link for you to start there so that you can go through the podcast stories and say, oh, I haven't seen that one or heard about that, and just click the link and it'll start playing right from that spot. And then there's a share link where you can copy an actual link to the story that you were watching and send it to people via text and email. So we provide ways for you to share this podcast, and that's what you got to do to get people informed so they can protect and defend their individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. Okay? That's the main thing. We definitely appreciate our donors. We couldn't fight the fights we fight without them. Thank you. If you can donate, please do. But it's also important to share the story and the news so people are informed. And then when we ask you to do things, and on our podcast page on our website, there's a list of this week's action items. I haven't asked you to do anything in the first half of this podcast, which is unusual, but we'll see how it goes here in the second half. All right? But thanks for being with us. We really, really appreciate it. And appreciate all of your support. All right, so let's get into some domestic issues here. This was interesting and good news. J.P. Morgan launches $1.5 trillion security initiative to boost America's critical industries. This is interesting to me that J.P. Morgan feels that it has to do this. J.P. Morgan Chase has unveiled a $1.5 trillion investment plan to bolster core U.S. industries such as energy, defense, and advanced technology, calling it essential to restoring U.S. industrial strength and resilience. Under a 10-year initiative announced on October 13th, the bank will facilitate finance and invest in industries deemed vital to U.S. security, including advanced manufacturing, defense technology, energy infrastructure, critical minerals, and frontier fields such as artificial intelligence and quantum computing. It has become painfully clear that the United States has allowed itself to become too reliant on unreliable sources of critical minerals, products, and manufacturing, all of which are essential to our national security, Jamie Dimon said. Our security is predicated on the strength and resilience of the American economy. Okay? Now, these are the same people who were doing ESG, right? The thing that was destroying energy here in the United States and globally, right? Jamie Dimon, those guys were at the World Economic Forum talking about, only investing in companies that were environmentally sound, which was the Green New Scam, which was what destroyed our energy, all right? And so it's interesting that they've now come to the other side, and it's a good sign. Regardless of past problems, we'll take the $1.5 trillion because we need it, all right? The move comes amid escalating tensions with China over supplies of rare earth minerals, materials essential to everything from fighter jets to semiconductors. U.S. President Donald Trump, as I said in the beginning, had to put 100% tariff on China because they're trying to restrict those. So we got a problem here, and we've got to act. So this was, what happens when you have supply and demand issues? Yeah, there's money to be made. Rare earth stocks go vertical after report Pentagon to go on 1 billion critical mineral buying spree. All of you should pay attention to this. Again, we don't give financial advice. We have common sense. This story should have your attention. This is from Zero Hedge, a website that I like to follow. We've been bullish on rare earth minerals for over 3 months, long before the mainstream press caught on. While the media is just catching up, Zero Hedge have hopefully been Zero Hedge people have been enjoying locking in multiples of gains in popular rare earth stocks like U.S. Rare Earths, USAR, on the stock market, and MP Materials, as the Pentagon is quietly ramping up its billion-dollar mineral stockpiling spree, now being highlighted by the Financial Times over the weekend. Recall all the way back on July 11th, we wrote The Coming Rare Earth Revolution and How to Profit. For our premium subscribers, USAR was trading at $11 on July 11th. At the time of this article being writing this morning, it's $38, right? Almost a 400% gain. In months, MP Materials was trading at about $45 at the time, and this morning is bid at 86. That's like double. According to filings for the Defense Logistics Agency, the U.S. Department of Defense has moved to secure up to $1 billion in critical minerals from cobalt to scandium and tantalum as part of a global race to reduce dependence on China. One former defense official summed it up. They're definitely looking for more, and we're going to do it in a deliberate and expansive way. If I had more money, you know what I'd be doing. If you do have some money, I would hope you're picking up on that, because this is critical. We are in a race, and they are literally racing. There was a video I saw out in Nevada where they're breaking ground to build this plant, and it's full speed ahead. So, this is all part of this global fight to protect and defend our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. So I talked to you earlier about the tariffs and how they're winning and how they're helping Trump deal with the shutdown and other things. Trump tariff triumph. Stellantis to invest $13 billion in Rust Belt, bringing overseas production back to the U.S. This is a big deal. President Donald Trump's 25% tariffs on foreign-made cars have scored the nation's Rust Belt a major manufacturing victory, as Stellantis, which I think is Chrysler and all those guys, announced a $13 billion investment and plans to reshore production from overseas. On Wednesday, Stellantis executives said the automaker will be investing billions in the United States, including more than $600 million to reopen the Belvidere assembly plant in Belvidere, Illinois, after having closed it under the Biden administration. Stellantis executive noted the $13 billion investment is the largest in the automaker's history in the U.S. market, vowing that more than 5,000 auto jobs will be created in Ohio, Illinois, Michigan, and Indiana as a result. This is not small, kids. This is a big deal. Significantly, Stellantis plans to return production to the U.S. of its Jeep Compass and Jeep Cherokee, both of which are currently manufactured in foreign countries. And I believe that's Toledo, Ohio, that will get that. So Trump is working for us. There's your proof. Now, let me just take a side note here to say something. Trump and Besnet, the Treasury Secretary, and Ludnick and these guys are trying to thread the needle, because here's the problem. There is inflation, though. I saw gas prices here at $2.15 a gallon. And I told you, I think last week, that they're talking about Trump thinks gas is going to be under $2, and that's going to have a ripple effect on everything from food prices, to energy costs, to manufacturing costs, because that petroleum is in plastics and everything else. So that's good. But things, go to the restaurant, man. Go to the grocery store. I had to buy 2 screws, little tiny brass screws at Ace Hardware this week. They were 85 cents a piece. They should have been like 6 cents. Okay? So we're all got big inflation. And the problem is the tariffs are going to raise our costs. So Trump is trying to thread the needle by helping you with lower gas prices, for instance, to be able to afford the higher costs until they can bring them down, right, with AI and stuff like that, and before we can get these jobs in place that will help you have more income to afford the high costs. So one of the things that's going to happen, and Besnet, I'm going to talk about that coming up. He did a a meeting with small community banks, and he talks about this, and I'll show you that in a second. But they're trying to thread the needle because costs are up, so he's trying to help us economically pay for those until they can bring them down. This Stellantis thing is no small deal. This was not a small deal to all of us either. John Bolton indicted after raid shows illegal possession of classified docs, which you're going to hear from the left and the media and all the people who broke the law, who weaponized the government, who illegally targeted Trump and all of us, right? Who are all saying, this is just a political witch hunt. John Bolton didn't do anything. Yeah, well, Jonathan Turley has looked at the 18 counts, okay? And these are serious issues. He's going to go to jail for a long time. John Bolton, who served as President Donald Trump's national security advisor during the president's first term, but he also worked for Obama and the left, okay, was indicted on October 16th for allegedly unauthorized sharing and retention of classified documents. Bolton, 76, faces 18 counts under the Espionage Act, according to federal indictment. They said in the indictment, from on or about April 9th, 2018, for at least on or about August 22nd of 2025, Bolton abused his position as National Security Advisor by sharing more than 1,000 pages of information about his day-to-day activities as a National Security Advisor, including information relating to the national defense, which was classified up to the top secret SCI level with two unauthorized individuals, federal prosecutors alleged in the indictment. They got the goods. He did it. Don't tell me, oh, you just didn't like that I wrote a book criticizing Trump. You're a scumbag. You tried to overthrow, and you did overthrow the U.S. government. And all of you are traitors. This is just the surface. I want more charges against these people, like sedition, okay? But don't believe their lies that, oh, this is just Trump. There's nothing here. I mean, honest to God, they've got watch the video on X by the guy who's looked at Latina James's mortgage fraud thing. It's unbelievable. She's not just guilty of one or two things. It's like 20 years of things she did wrong to make money. And she's a lawyer. She's the Attorney General of New York. And then it comes out that these homes that she fraudulently got loans for have her two criminal nieces in them. These are bad people. They're like a mini crime family. Oh, but on the mainstream media, this is all Trump's imagination. Nothing but vindictiveness. Not at all. We aren't for retribution. We're for equal justice under the law. That's what they're upset about. They don't want to pay for what they did. That's what they're upset about. They don't want equal justice under the law. They want to rule over you and me and be able to indict a ham sandwich for nothing, which is, by the way, there was Scott Jennings on CNN was on this panel where this woman admitted that all the counts against Trump were phony. They were just part of the resistance. The resistance is insurrection. The resistance is sedition. They need to be charged for that. So I thought this was good in the fight against the deep state. You may have picked up on this or not, but it's really interesting. Pentagon press is peacocking in protest, giving Department of War Secretary Hegseth exactly what he wants. So what is this about? It's really quite simple. The Pentagon has been a sieve of leaking classified documents to journalists who hate America and want us to destroy us for decades. Pete Hegseth says, no more. You are not allowed to just roam the frickin' halls of the Pentagon aimlessly every day without our permission. We're going to stop this, okay? And they went berserker. You can't do that. You can't do that. Yes, he can. And he did. And guess what? They helped them. The media covering the Department of Defense, now the Department of War, is having a conniption and banding together to oppose the new restrictions that have been placed on their news gathering. The end results of this defiance will be granting Secretary Pete Hegseth precisely what he wanted. There has been a long simmering feud at the Pentagon since Hegseth stepped in as Secretary of War, and it's reaching a boiling point this week. After a series of initial moves that saw longtime outlets displaced from the press room and other non-traditional changes, this has escalated in the past month with the release of a new set of press credential parameters. Hegseth is insisting on restricting some of the access that have been granted inside the building, as well as tightened requirements for press credentialing, and threatening that these credentials could be revoked should an outlet dispense information not officially approved by the Defense Department. So again, what they're saying is, where before you could roam the halls, some lefty, creep, anti-American scumbag in the Defense Department, and there's many, okay, and there were certainly many under Biden and Obama. They were placed there on purpose. They slip you some secret documents. You go do a headline story to stop, Trump's plan, and there's impunity. You don't have nothing happens to you. And Hegseth is saying, no, it ain't happening no more. And we reserve the right to revoke your press credentials if you do publish something that's unauthorized. They're having a conniption fit. Who cares? Shut up. And they said, we're still going to cover the Pentagon. Yeah, can you cover it any worse than you already do? So why help them? Kudos to Pete Hegseth, okay? That's what we want to see. Fight the left. Fight the propaganda machine. And it's working. And here's proof of that. Fallout from going woke continues with massive layoffs at another news giant. Well, they used to be a giant. Now maybe they're not so much of a giant. What an incredible week it has been. First, President Donald Trump flew to the Middle East to take part in a historic Gaza-Israeli peace deal. He brokered it. He didn't just take part. And now there's news that the media giant NBC News is ready to cut its news department staff. Over the last few years, it was retail outlets that learned this lesson the hard way when they decided to ignore their customers, pushing gender ideology, insanity, and DEI instead of just giving the customers what they want, which is competency and merit-based promotions. Among right-leaning outlets, it's simply become known as go woke, go broke. Despite all the warning signs, legacy media continued to embrace the radical leftist ideas and force them on their audience. Now they too are feeling the pain as the fallout from doing so has hit NBC News with an announcement of massive layoffs. Some 150 layoffs took place on Wednesday at NBC News following the separation of MSNBC and CNBC from NBC News. See, they were all part of one company and they sold off MSNBC and CNBC as part of the Verisant spinoff from its parent company Comcast. Per a source, the cuts were driven by the fact that NBC News will no longer be providing news gathering capabilities for CNBC and MSNBC, as well as broader concerns about the over-economic environment for the media sector. They're losing viewers. That's what the bottom line is. They're losing money like crazy. The report is that the cuts took place across all the news groups. Another report noted that departments affected, including the diversity, equity, inclusion, and LGBTQ ones, among others. Bye-bye. See you later. Have a nice day. Okay? So I mentioned earlier this Scott Bassnett event. I put this on our website, wethepeopleconvention.org, in the video section. Treasury Secretary Bassnett commits to the rebuilding of community banks. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. Part of our prosperity used to be that we had small community banks. And my first loan, I was just out of college. I got from Lou Saboro at Kent, at the bank in Kent, Ohio. Kent Savings and Loan, I think it was called. All right. And it was based on him knowing me and knowing what I could do. And it was a small, inexpensive house and all that stuff. But we had community banks who actually knew you. In 2008, and as part of the scam that was thrusted on us by the major banks, which they were forced to do because of the Barney Frank and those guys using Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to give the ability for big banks to bundle mortgages and create these subprime crises that nearly destroyed the country in 2008. Remember that? How can you forget that? Well, what happened? Oh, the big banks were too big to fail, and we're going to bail them out, right? Barack Obama, we're going to bail them out. Well, at the same time, they destroyed your community bank, destroyed it. And now they've been barely hanging on, and I was thrilled to see Treasury Secretary Bessnet saying the Trump administration is committed to rebuilding your community banks. This is going to become really important to each of you. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent today shared several steps the Trump administration plans to take to drive a community bank comeback, including a renewed push for regulatory tailoring, a review of core platform providers, friendlier capital requirements, and revised requirements for bank anti-money laundering, countering the financing of terrorism programs. To expand opportunities for all Americans, the banks that serve Main Street must have the same chance to succeed as the banks who serve Wall Street. What a concept, huh? But the post-2008 financial crisis regulatory framework has instead become a threat to the community banks model, Bassett said at the Federal Reserve's Community Bank Conference. Since 2010, we've lost 3,600 community banks. And in a disturbing new development, de novo chartering has dropped precipitously, averaging just 6 new banks per year since 2010, meaning there were no new community banks. In this video, this is an ask. I'm asking you to watch this and share this. You're going to hear some really good news about how having community banks will make it easier for you to buy a car, to finance your boat, to your roof on your house, whatever it is. Really good thing. I actually put a transcript of it in the article if you want to read it, but go watch that video. It's really good, and it's really good news for all of us to have what? Choice. The problem we have in America today, we have trillionaires and starving people, and young people can't buy a house because we have no antitrust, because we have illegal monopolies, whether they be Facebook, Google, Tesla, whatever, okay, Amazon, Walmart. Those are illegal monopolies. They should have been broken up, and the banks are part of that. And the Trump administration understands that. And that's what individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity is about. Share this segment with people so they understand how important this is to them. Because we've got stuff like this going on, okay? Now let's see here. This is about real estate. 5-alarm warning for housing market as key crash indicates spike of 17% in foreclosures, okay? And this is really worrisome. There has been a dramatic rise in foreclosure filings across the U.S. in the last year, the latest piece of bad news for the housing market. In July through September, there were a total of 100,513 U.S. properties with foreclosure filings just in those few months. That's a huge 17% increase from 2024. In September alone, there were 35,600 homes with foreclosure filings across the U.S., up 20% from a year ago. Well, what caused that? What was it that caused that? Well, here's a chart that might help you figure it out. Why couldn't you afford a house these past 7 years? Because millions of foreigners were given your tax dollars to drive up prices in your country and buy what should have been your home. This is treasonous. And then the post on X, this is from, and this will be linked on our podcast page, okay? The guy says it was all illegal immigrants overpaying for houses using taxpayer-funded welfare. And there's a chart here. FHA loan locks to immigrants without permit residency, including HB1 visa holders. Look at this chart of how from the time Biden took over after Trump was done in February 2021, it goes all the way up to May of 26, where 6% of all the homes were being bought by illegal immigrants with our money, with loans from us. And then if you look at the end of that graph, you see it just crashes to under 1% after the FHA ban that Trump put into effect. This is what we mean by the tyranny of the left. They did this to you. They did this to us. They did this to your children. And but Trump's the king for trying to stop it. Wow, that's rich. So let me move on, to this other story that's kind of disturbing to me. Trump says he has authorized covert CIA operations in Venezuela. The president has authorized CIA actions and military strikes, citing international drug trafficking linked to Venezuela. Now, we've been talking about Trump using the military to destroy these drug boats coming out of Venezuela. And then he put these planes, in Puerto Rico that are capable of striking Venezuela. He's clearly got a problem with Venezuela, and I haven't really figured it out. But why would you say the CIA is on the ground there? U.S. President Donald Trump on Wednesday confirmed he has authorized covert CIA operations in Venezuela. The decision will expand U.S. assets deployed to the area, placing added pressure on the regime's leader, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, who's a drug cartel owner and who's a thug. The development is the latest in a series of events amid growing tensions between the United States and Venezuela, including U.S. tariffs on countries that buy Venezuelan oil and strikes on boats off the coast of Venezuela. That Trump says they were trafficking drugs, which they are. Trump said he authorized operations for two reasons, citing criminal and drug trafficking. They have emptied their prisons in the United States of America. They came in through the border. They came in because we had an open border, he told reporters in the Oval Office. Trump has accused the Maduro government of releasing criminals, of doing this. The United States has placed pressure on him through economic sanctions, and he actually put a $50 million bounty on Maduro, but I think he wants someone to kill him. Okay? So why are we doing that? Well, Glenn Beck had a story this week where he basically talked about there's this island just off the coast of Venezuela where Iran trains terrorists, like for Hamas and Hezbollah, and that Venezuelan drug people go to that island to train with the Iranians and then go to Iran for further training, and then Maduro sends them to the United States. Do you see what this is? This is international terrorism. So now it's making sense to me why Trump wants to get rid of Maduro, right? And remember, the Nobel Peace Committee gave the Peace Prize to a woman in Venezuela, who then dedicated it to Donald Trump because she said the Venezuelan people need Trump to overthrow this narco-terrorist who's controlling our country. So that's why Trump's doing this, okay? But I got to tell you, I've said to you guys, and I think you laugh at me many times. I'm sure many of you guys laugh at a lot of things I say, and that's good. We need to have a sense of humor, and I say some things that are pretty off the wall and tongue-in-cheek and funny. But I've said to you that these Mexican and South American drug cartels are so wealthy, they actually own their own submarines to bring drugs here. Did you remember me saying that ever over the last 16 years? So when Trump had his press conference this week, I had a smile on my face. Trump confirms U.S. strike on alleged drug-carrying submarine. There have been no known survivors until now across 6 military strikes that have killed at least 27. U.S. President Donald Trump on Friday confirmed a U.S. military strike on an alleged drug-carrying submarine in the Caribbean, and amid reports, the military is holding 2 survivors aboard a Navy ship after its strike killed 2 others. We attacked a submarine, and that was a drug-carrying submarine built specifically for the transportation of massive amounts of drugs to the United States, Trump said while hosting Ukraine President Vladimir Zelensky in the White House. He actually confirmed what I've been telling you because it's true. I know it's true. Then I heard a story that Mexico had its drug cartel operators had volunteered to be in the Ukraine army to learn about their drone technology so they could steal it and use it on the U.S. I'm not making this up, kids. The Mexican CIA, or where they are, notified the Ukrainians, and I think they arrested the guys. But do you understand the level of threat? This is a damn dangerous world. Why? because China has made it so. The World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, all these anti-Western groups who've been thrusting DEI and trans nonsense on us to weaken. Hey, ho, ho, Western Civ has got to go. Right? They've been chanting that for how long? They haven't just been chanting, kids. They're trying to destroy what made the world the amazing place it is, as personified by your country, our country, my country, the United States, which is built on capitalism and individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. They're at war with this. They want to rule over you. And it ain't just words. That's why we're blowing up their submarines. Thank God for Donald Trump. Okay. Moving on here. Got a few things. I talked a little bit earlier about the Dems taking money, the Dem governor candidate in Virginia and in New Jersey, getting money from the communist Chinese. Yeah, make sure you share that. That's an ask. I should have asked. You share that to your friends in New Jersey and Virginia, okay? The Dems are owned by the commies. Big surprise. That's why the commies are sponsoring the No Kings rally today, right? Okay? So this was interesting. VA Dems called on Sears, the candidate, Winston Sears, Republican candidate, to condemn the GOP group chat that Politico exposed this week to try to embarrass Republicans. They weren't expecting this response. So what happened? The Politico unveils this week as a right before the election hit job, this chat by young Republicans in Virginia where they said some horrific things, okay? And in that chat, they're like, so, we're not this J character who's running for attorney general. We talked about him all last week. This clown is running for attorney general. The lead law enforcement officer in Virginia called for the assassination of the Republican Speaker of the House when he was in the House, and said he wanted his children to be killed and his mother to witness it. And he said he wants police shot. Okay? Well, they released this bogus, boys thing, these young Republicans chat that had some terrible things, really bad things in it. And they were like that used as a moral equivalency. So they go against Winston Sears, who's the woman, the black lady, who's a really nice woman and conservative, former military. They put out a thing to her saying, you need to condemn these people. VA GOP gubernatorial nominee Winston Earl Sears swiftly condemned those tied to a young Republicans group chat scandal, and now she's calling on her opponent, Democrat Abigail Spanberger, to do the same with regards to her own running mate, Attorney General nominee Jay Jones. In a press release issued Wednesday, the Democrat Party of Virginia said Earl Sears must call on participants of the leaky young Republicans chat that used racial language to step down for their roles, joining Virginia young Republican Thomas Turner, something the lieutenant governor had no problem doing. Winston Sears replied on X, easy. They absolutely must step down. But now it's your turn, Abigail, to ask for Jay Jones to step down. And she wouldn't do it. She wouldn't do it, okay? And so literally everyone on the Virginia ticket, which was leading a month ago in the governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, they're all now losing. And they need to lose. And they just had a debate this week where Jay Jones sincerely apologized. That's great, pal. But you can't be the lead law enforcement person who believed at any time in your life that political assassination was right. And you can't be the governor if you don't decry that. Okay? If you don't call for him to step down. I think we're going to win Virginia, kids. And I think we're going to win in New Jersey. Mostly because of Scott Pressler. The guy that did so well in Pennsylvania as an organizer. He's like a gay Charlie Kirk in a way. Okay? Great guy. And he's working his tail off in New Jersey. And I think we can win New Jersey. It's awesome. So then there was a debate this week for the New York mayor. And I've told you I've stayed away from this thing. I don't think we can do much about it. Okay. And the debate was Mandami was just horrible. He was horrible. They basically said, that how are you going to pay for free buses? How are you going to pay? How are you going to lower the cost for rental units and stuff? It's going to cost like $18 billion or $8 billion. Where are you going to get the money? And he says he's going to raise taxes on the rich. But the New York governor, who's also running in 2026, says, well, no, we ain't raising taxes. We're already losing our biggest businesses, right? Dick Morris, my old friend Dick Morris, and yes, he is a friend. He was at our very first We the People convention in 2011 and had been back before that. And I used to correspond with him fairly regularly. I don't now, but he has a video. He puts out these lunchtime videos. If you just search for Dick Morris, you'll see these lunchtime videos because he's still a very astute political analyst, okay, and strategist. He put this out. I'm going to read some of it to you because it was a different take. If Mandami wins, Trump will take over the city of New York and the GOP will take over the state of New York. If Zoran Kwame Mandami is elected mayor of New York City, it will inevitably trigger the takeover of the city by the Trump administration. 1/3 of the city's operating budget comes from state and federal aid. Trump will undoubtedly react to Mandami's victory by slashing or even totally freezing federal aid to both the city and state. In addition, Mandami's socialist agenda will make it very hard for the city or the state to borrow long-term or even short-term bonds on the bond market. Local tax revenues that pay for 2/3 of the city budget are heavily dependent on property tax collection, which generates over $32 billion last year. His proposed rent freeze will cause a sharp drop in property tax collections, necessitating both long and short-term borrowing to make the budget balance, which they aren't going to get. New York City, under state law, is a creature of the New York state and totally subservient to its laws and wishes. That's interesting. In fact, the governor of the state can remove the mayor, a power last exercised by then-Governor Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1932 when he tried to fire New York City Mayor Jimmy Walker on bribery allegations, but Walker resigned before Roosevelt could act. But as the governor, Roosevelt could have fired him. The daily need for the city and the state for federal and state aid to meet its budget obligations, as well as the legal power of the governor over the mayor, give both Trump and New York State Governor Kathy Hochul tremendous political and financial leverage over the city's mayor. Should Trump move to cut off federal funds to New York City, it would trigger a financial crisis far greater than that in the 1970s that forced the state to take over the city's finances in 1970. The fiscal squeeze that would cut off a flow of federal aid would pose serious political problems for Kathy Hochul, a Democrat who is also running, in 2026 because she's got a major challenge from Congresswoman Elsie Stefanik, and there'll be in a box. Stay tuned. Never doubt. There's people who say that after Trump's done being president, that he's going to run for mayor of New York. I don't know. God's got a plan. Trump's got a plan. I don't know. But it was interesting to get Dick Morris's take on that. So I hope you appreciated that. That was kind of interesting. Now, so again, this whole idea about elections, the big story this week, and you can get this at wethepeopleconvention.org, and you should read it and share it. SCOTUS considers limiting racial redistricting of congressional districts. And if you can see the video, you will see a map of the South that says if the Supreme Court makes changes to this law, that it will the Republicans will pick up like 19 House seats. And they heard the arguments this week, and they will decide in June. And that will give the states the ability to redistrict based on whatever they say before 2028. The Voting Rights Act probably won't be gutted by the Supreme Court, but appears it will be ready to restrain it. If you only read the headlines after the Supreme Court re-arguments of Louisiana versus Calise, you'd think conservatives on the court were sharpening their knives to gut the Voting Rights Act. Just like, the left just always goes to the furthest extreme on everything they say. The reality inside the courtroom was more nuanced, and for those who actually care about constitutional limits, more encouraging. The justices weren't preparing to demolish Section 2. They were trying to rescue it from the legal contradictions that have plagued redistricting for 40 years. Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act prohibits any map of election law that results in minority voters having less opportunity than others to elect their candidates of choice. In 1986, the court's decision in Thornburg versus Gingles established a three-part test: a large and compact minority population, political cohesion, and majority bloc voting. So that was the test for redistricting. In Allen versus Mulligan in 2023, Chief Justice Roberts reaffirmed that Section 2 can still require states to draw minority districts under those conditions. But what happens when satisfying Section 2 forces the legislature to make race the overriding factor? That's racism. That's illegal, and that's what actually happened in Louisiana. Louisiana found itself trapped between two conflicting commands. A federal court instructed the legislature to create a second minority black district under Section 2. The moment it did, another set of plaintiffs sued, saying the new map, which passed our legislature as Senate Bill 8, was unconstitutional racial gerrymandering because these were white plaintiffs. And it looks like the court is going to rule that you can't make race the only reason for drawing the district. And that's what they've been doing for 40 years. The arguments from the left were insane. The DEI never should have been confirmed, and every Republican who voted for Ketanji Brown shall never be forgiven. This woman has no right being on any court, let alone Supreme Court. You know what she said in her arguments? Folks, look it up. You can't make this up. She said that blacks should have these districts because they have a disability. They don't know how to vote. It's insane. This black woman just said blacks can't decide how to vote because they're black. Wow. They call us racist? And then the other ones were talking about that white people won't vote for black people. That's why you need to do this. Except there's all these people in Congress who are black in white majority districts. It's insane. They're insane. And what have they done since the 60s? When LBJ rigged the laws, right, to make sure blacks stayed on the plantation and voted Democrat for the rest of their lives, they have ruined our elections for their own power. And now it's coming undone. Folks, if this stays, they're done. They will be the Whigs. Literally, they will be the Whigs. The Democrats will never win another election, because they haven't been able to win them based on ideas. They've won them based on cheating. And from the census to the districts to the gerrymandering, they've cheated. They can't win because they have no ideas except America sucks and Americans suck and we want to rule over you. That's their plan. No kings. Have a nice day. Okay, a few more stories and we'll wrap this up. Some good news, okay? This is a chart that I saw that was really interesting. The time on social media peaked in 2022 with young people cutting back first. This is really, really interesting. So this chart, for those of you you're listening to the podcast, not watching it, the 16 to 24-year-olds started to stop going on social media, reduce their usage in 2014. The 25 to 34-year-olds, it took until 2024, and now the 35 to 44-year-olds and the 45 to 54-year-olds, it's leveling off. Only the older people, only the 55 to 64-year-olds, because we have too much time and they're addicted to Facebook and everything else, are still using it. But this is interesting. We're going to have to watch this trend because, if anything, we need less time on social media and more time face-to-face, more time with each other. more human interaction where you can't just say stupid stuff and not be challenged. That's what's wrecking what? Our nation, which is based on what Charlie Kirk taught. Talking to each other, debating, and coming to a mutual agreed upon solution. That's what it's supposed to be. Oh, but the left said speech is violence, so I can just shoot Charlie Kirk because I don't like his speech. Yeah, that's not right. That's wrong. And we stand against that. And we will stand against that. And we will defeat anybody who says something so stupid as speech is violence. It's insane. They are insane. This was not insane. This was a surprise. And man, we always talk about Trump can walk and chew gum. Holy man. I mean, it's just amazing. It's amazing. He's doing peace in the Middle East. He's fighting terrorism in Venezuela, right? He's getting Stellantis to come build car factories here. He's lowering gas prices. He does this. This is from the whitehouse.gov news section. Fact sheet. President Donald J. Trump announces action to lower the cost and expand access to in vitro fertilization, IVF, and high-quality fertility care. Now, I know for some of you in the hard right pro-life camp, you are against IVF. I had a big falling out with the Ohio life groups on this issue because I think, as you know, we have a crisis in the world of not enough babies, and you want to stop people from having babies because they use IVF and they don't use all the embryos, and you claim those embryos that are discarded is murder. I understand your position, but I'm pro-life, meaning the more babies, the better. And President Trump certainly is. And so for some reason, it was called to his attention that there was a crisis in IVF. And today, President Donald Trump announced the third agreement with a leading pharmaceutical manufacturer to bring American drug prices in line with the lowest paid prices in other developed nations, and notice the most favored nation pricing. This agreement is with one of the world's leading manufacturers of fertility medications, EMD Serrano, and will result in massive cost savings on fertility treatments. Okay? But not only are they lowering the cost, they're getting rid of regulations. They're cutting through red tape to deliver savings on medicines. They're creating the ability to have novel drugs used. They're basically making it so that poorest people can have IVF. Let's be honest. Mostly rich people could afford to do this. It was really expensive. But now he's making it available for more people, which will create more babies. That's good. You should be for that. Okay? Those of you who disagree, feel free to write me. info@wethepeopleconvention.com. .org, info@wethepeopleconvention.org. If you disagree, you're not going to win me over. I'm for IVF. I'm glad President Trump did this, and it was a good thing for a lot of people who really, really want to have a baby and can't. They can't. Okay? This is the way they can. That's important. Okay. This is a kind of a cool story. Okay. In Ohio, this has been a big deal, and there's been some news stories on this, and we've even covered this story in our podcast in the past. And there's this thing called LifeWise, off-school property, and it's this thing where your kids, there's a law that allows your kids to get on a bus and go during the school day to get Bible studies, to learn about religion in the public schools. And it's controversial, but it's not. It's the freaking law. And so here's the trailer, because they've got a movie that's coming out that you might want to go see. So here's the trailer. Enjoy this.
School, kids, Bible. Somehow during school hours, you can't do that. That's illegal.
Decades ago, the Bible was systematically removed from the public school day.
There is still constantly Bible reading and prayer recitation in the public schools.
The Supreme Court has made a judgment.
Why do they put the battleground in the public schools?
The most transformative book in all of human history, banned from the one place we educate 90% of our population.
The Bible's impact is hard to overestimate. It's the foundation of modern science.
Faith and common sense is really nonsense, and it is destroying all the beautiful things the Bible had brought to the Christian civilization.
Yeah, it's a problem. But what if the separation of church and state has been widely misunderstood? And what if the solution to reintegrate the Bible into the public school day has been right under our nose for the last 70 years?
It's not atheism that's going to bring peace to the world.
The Bible as the key resource in every child's education is indispensable.
There's a way to bring it back. Many call it a movement. Others call it a loophole. A loophole so big, you could drive a bus through it.
Get tickets at fathomentertainment.com. Coming up October 23rd. And then share it. It's good news. There is no way we should not have religious learning in our schools. The separation of church and state is a lie. That was the commies and the leftists did that. We need to get it back in our schools. And here's a way to do it legally. You're going to love that. So maybe tune into that. All right. We're going to wrap up, the podcast with, what was a really emotional thing. After President Trump does peace in the Middle East, he flies for I don't know how many frickin' hours to get back so that he could give our friend Charlie Kirk the Presidential Medal of Honor, the highest honor a civilian can get in the Rose Garden. And, he presented it to Erica Kirk in a very emotional ceremony on Charlie's birthday. President Donald Trump honored his late friend Charlie Kirk with the nation's highest civilian honor, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Friends of Kirk gathered Tuesday at the White House in a Rose Garden, newly renovated by the president, to honor Kirk's memory and to recognize him for his patriotic contributions to the United States of America. The event was supposed to be indoors in the White House. So many people wanted to attend, they had to move it to the Rose Garden, and there had to be, 500 people there. All the most powerful people in the world were there to honor Charlie Kirk on his birthday. Erica Kirk, Charlie's widow, was presented at an emotional event, as were many members of the Turning Point USA organization. It was purposely held on October 14th, a day that should have been Charlie Kirk's 32nd birthday. And it was really a great ceremony. I have it on our website at wethepeopleconvention.org. You can watch the comments, which were great. And I know that many of you attended the thousands and thousands of memorial ceremonies around the country, spontaneous ceremonies to remember Charlie Kirk on his birthday. And there's legislation going forward to make October 14th a day to remember Charlie Kirk forever. And I ask that you support that by writing to your congressmen and senators and asking them to make that true. Again, I'm not saying this just because I knew him and you knew him and we loved him. I'm saying this because he is Charlie Kirk's impact on this nation, his ability to bring us back to the revival, to reconnect faith and governance in the way our founders intended, has turbocharged our nation. And we've talked about that. And he's going to have a lasting legacy like John Adams and Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. That's why he deserves a day. He's at least as big as Martin Luther King. He deserves it, and we must remember him because what he taught us was so important. And I said, so many of you, attended these events that just sprung up. Nan was just running an errand during the day on Tuesday and saw people setting up here in our township. And she stopped and said, "What's going on?" And they said, "We're having a memorial for Charlie Kirk." We didn't even know about it. So Nan and I went, and they asked me to speak. And I didn't expect to speak, but it was a great crowd with bands and people testifying about how Charlie Kirk helped them in their lives. It was awesome. You're awesome. I hope you went to one of those events. It was awesome to remember Charlie and to commit ourselves to follow in his footsteps, to get back to the Bible, to get back to faith, to get back to each other and our families, and to bring our country together again, and then to do what is required. Because I said in my speech, our founding fathers said what? This republic is for a moral and religious people and is totally unsuitable for any other. And they were right. If we want the republic, and if you want to protect and defend your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity, you must self-govern. And what does that mean? It means you must follow the 10 Commandments. Because if you don't commit murder or theft, you need a lot less policemen. If you take care of your wife and family, your husband and family, you don't need children's services, right? You don't need courts. You don't need government if you self-govern. And that was the secret of our founding fathers. And that's why we were so prosperous for so long. And it's only since the socialist communists have infiltrated our institutions and gaslighted you into thinking that you can't succeed without the government that we've become in danger. And that's the fight we're fighting. And that's the fight we're winning. And I hope that's the fight you will continue to fight and win in your personal life and in your community. Because that's how you defeat communism. That's how you defeat evil. That's how you have to defeat the devil. Okay? All right. We'll always remember Charlie Kirk. We will fulfill his mission by completing America's spiritual revival, right? That's what it's all about. I want you to remember to tell people about this podcast. If you have questions or comments, write to me, info@wethepeopleconvention.org. And please act on what we ask you to do. That's how we defend our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity, right? That's what it's about. So watch the Scott Bessnet thing about community banks and share it, right? Share with the people in Virginia and in New Jersey the story about the two governor candidates in the Democrat side are taking money from the Chinese, okay? Share the trailer about the school, religious school teaching video that's going to come out, okay? Act in defense of individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. I hope you have an awesome week. Enjoy the fall weather. Enjoy each other. Be happy warriors, but don't be afraid to fight and speak out. Speak up against any transgression that violates what we believe in. Do not fear the No Kings people. Don't fear them, but also don't allow them to push the agenda. Fight back with your words and your actions. Defend our nation and your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. God willing, we'll all be back together again next weekend. I hope so. You've been listening to the We the People Convention News and Opinion Podcast, and my name is Tom Zalostowski. May God bless you, and may God continue to bless the United States of America. Have a great week.
Whoa. intertwined.